The interview was supposed to be routine, a live broadcast, 5 cameras, 3 assistants, 2 sets of cue cards. One Senator JD Vance, seated calmly in a navy blue suit, straight-backed and sharp-eyed beneath the studio lights. Across from him, Morgan Kessler, a progressive-leaning investigative journalist with a reputation for asking the hard questions and getting the viral moments. The countdown started in her earpiece. 5, 4, 3. They were live. "Tonight," Morgan began, "we speak with Ohio Senator JD Vance, author, veteran, and one of the most polarizing figures in American politics." JD raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Morgan leaned in, voice just edged enough to make her intention clear. "Senator," she said, "a lot of people, especially in urban communities, view your rise not as inspirational but as dangerous. You've supported policies that many say are exclusionary, regressive, even anti-democratic. How do you respond?" The studio went still. The control room leaned in. JD Vance didn't blink. Instead, he folded his hands slowly, deliberately. "I think the most dangerous thing in this country," he said quietly, "is the idea that disagreement is inherently hateful. That someone who grew up in poverty, served in the Marines, and worked his way through Yale somehow lost the right to think independently, just because his conclusions make some people uncomfortable." Morgan wasn't expecting that. JD continued, calmly, "I've been called a lot of things. Dangerous? That's a new one. But if danger means telling young men that masculinity isn't toxic, if it means defending families, if it means saying that working-class America deserves a voice, then maybe we need a little more danger in Washington." Morgan didn't interrupt. Not yet. He leaned forward slightly. "What I oppose isn't progress. It's pretense. The pretense that freedom is only for people who agree with the narrative. The pretense that tradition is a threat, and the pretense that patriotism is outdated." The camera stayed on him. No cutaways, no edits. Morgan hesitated for the first time, because something in the room had shifted. JD wasn't raising his voice. He was just peeling back the mask, and for the first time the audience watching at home saw a man who wasn't interested in winning the moment. He was speaking from the fight he lived. And Morgan, eyes still steady, realized she might not be the one controlling this interview anymore. Morgan Kessler wasn't new to political interviews. She'd gone head-to-head with governors, military leaders, even a Nobel Prize winner who walked out mid-segment. She was trained to stay cool, stick to the facts, and never let emotion throw her off. But something about JD Vance's answer, not defensive, not angry, just real, was harder to handle than she'd expected. Still, she moved to the next card in her lap. "Senator," she said, "you've been accused of promoting division, of using cultural rhetoric that inflames rural-urban tension, race-based anxieties, and what some call identity resentment. Do you take any responsibility for how your words land?" JD nodded slowly. "Sure," a beat. "But I'd ask, who decides what division looks like?" Morgan blinked. JD leaned in, his voice still low, conversational, but this time it carried a quiet burn. "When I talk about fatherlessness in America, I get accused of moralizing. When I talk about opioid addiction in my hometown, I'm called backward. When I say that dignity matters more than dependency, I get told I'm waging class warfare. But I've lived through all of that. Not in theory. In boots, in uniform, in paycheck-to-paycheck apartments. So maybe the real division isn't between left and right. Maybe it's between people who've had to rebuild from nothing, and people who've only ever studied poverty from behind a desk." The studio crew went still. Even the lighting assistant stopped adjusting. Morgan looked down, not out of embarrassment, but because something JD had said hit her memory like a match. She knew that paycheck-to-paycheck life too, before grad school, before her fellowship, before she'd traded food stamps for press credentials. She looked back up. "And yet," she said, her voice quieter now, "you've also said things about the media, about us, that feel like an attack, that we're the enemy, that we manipulate. Do you really believe that?" JD paused. This time his voice softened. "I don't think you're the enemy. I think you're just part of a system that forgot how to listen. You're smart, but smart doesn't mean right. You're sharp, but sharp can cut before it understands. I don't want to destroy the media. I want it to stop assuming it already knows the story." And then he flipped the script completely. "Tell me this, Morgan. Before this segment, how many interviews did you watch of mine? How many communities that support me did you visit? Or did you just read the quotes someone else clipped? Silence. Not for show, because she hadn't, and she knew it. The lights hadn't changed. The camera angles were the same. But for Morgan Kessler, everything felt different now. This wasn't the interview she planned. It wasn't the takedown her producers hinted at. It wasn't the viral clip they were fishing for. It had become something else. She looked at JD Vance, not as a senator or a headline, but as a man who'd just asked her a question no one had ever asked her on air. Did you come here to confirm what you already believed, or to find out if any of it was true? She exhaled, and then, for the first time in her career, she broke the script. Honestly, she said, I read the profiles. I watched the criticisms. I listened to the podcasts that disagreed with you. She paused. But no, I didn't watch you speak directly. Not until today. The crew behind the camera froze. That wasn't in the rundown. JD didn't gloat. He didn't nod. He just looked at her the same way he had from the beginning, direct, thoughtful, and patient. That's the real danger, Morgan, not me. The danger is what happens when we only hear filtered versions of each other, and then make judgments like we know the whole story. He let the words settle, then added, I'm not asking people to agree with me. I'm just asking them to hear me before they fear me. That line went nuclear. The live stream comment section exploded. This just became the most honest interview I've ever seen. Hearing before fearing, wow. Respect to Morgan for admitting it. JD Vance just changed the tone of political discourse in under 30 seconds. Morgan glanced at the clock. There were 7 minutes left, but the questions on her card felt irrelevant now. She put the cards aside. Then help me understand something, she said. You talk about America like it's in danger, but also like it's worth saving. How do you reconcile that? JD smiled. Not the political kind, but the quiet kind you give when you recognize someone's finally asking from the heart. Because broken doesn't mean abandoned. You don't leave a house just because it needs repairs. You rebuild it because it's home, Morgan blinked. JD continued, and the reason I'm in this chair right now, the reason I ran, is because I don't want my kids to grow up in a country where disagreement equals danger. I want them to grow up where courage sounds like listening, even when it's hard. Silence. Again. But this time, it was the sound of respect settling in. Morgan Kessler had hosted dozens of high-profile interviews, some explosive, some awkward, most forgettable. But this wasn't an interview anymore. It was a reckoning. Across the country, people weren't just watching, they were responding. Live chat feeds filled with hearts, flags, clapping hands, tears, even silence, digital silence, as thousands stopped arguing and started just reading. Clips of JD's line, "Hear me before you fear me," had already gone viral on multiple platforms. Cable news stations scrambled to cover the moment mid-broadcast. And in the studio, Morgan felt something shift inside her. A different voice rose in her head now. Not the producer, not the cynic, the daughter, the sister, the American. She leaned in, eyes locked on JD. Her voice was soft, but charged. You talk a lot about dignity, about tradition, about strength. But what about when those things hurt people? JD stilled. Morgan continued slowly. What do you say to the kid who hears your words and thinks they're being erased or excluded or told they don't belong in the America you want? A hush fell. It was a question born of pain, and JD could tell. For the first time, he didn't answer immediately. He looked down, breathed in. When he spoke, it wasn't rehearsed. It was raw. I'd say I'm sorry. Not because I hate them, but because somewhere along the line, this country got so loud we stopped making room for each other's hurt. I talk about tradition because I think it anchors us. I talk about strength because I think it saves us. But I also know, I've seen how those words can be twisted, and I hate that. So, to the kid who feels erased, I want you to know I don't want you gone. I want you grounded. He looked at the camera now, not as a politician, but as a father. You don't have to look like me, you don't have to vote like me, but you do belong in this country, and we need to start saying that out loud. Morgan's throat caught. Her producer whispered in her earpiece, 3 minutes, but she didn't flinch. That sounded like an apology. JD nodded. Maybe it is. She paused. I think a lot of people needed to hear that. He nodded again. So did I. The studio lights dimmed. The red live sign blinked off, and for a few seconds no one moved. Not the host, not the senator, not the crew. The air felt thick with something no script could manufacture: honesty. Morgan Kessler removed her earpiece slowly. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled off the mic clipped to her lapel. JD Vance leaned back in his chair, rubbed his hands together once, and looked at her. Calm, not smug, not victorious, just present. "I didn't expect that," she admitted. He nodded. "Neither did I." She hesitated, then surprised herself again. "I was ready to debate you, ready to draw blood." JD smiled slightly. "I noticed." They both chuckled, not because anything was funny, but because shared humanity had quietly taken over where policy once tried to divide. One of the camera operators, a woman in her 30s wearing a faded Union t-shirt, walked over, eyes glassy. "I'm not political," she said, "but whatever that was, we need more of it." Morgan blinked. So did JD, because behind the scenes something unexpected had started happening. Producers were putting down phones. Sound engineers were asking for transcripts. A junior editor in the back room, the same guy who spent most days auto-clipping political takedowns for social media, sent a message to the team chat: "We're not cutting this up for spin. We're airing it raw." Why? Because the conversation hadn't gone viral for outrage. It had gone viral for respect. Within 20 minutes, the segment was trending not under JD Vance or Morgan Kessler, but under a hashtag no one expected: "This is what we need." Clips weren't edited. They were full length, captioned not with opinions but direct quotes. "Hear me before you fear me. Broken doesn't mean abandoned. You do belong in this country." Maybe it is an apology. Back in the studio, Morgan looked at JD and asked quietly, "Can I ask you something, not as a reporter?" He nodded. "Why do you even do this? The politics, the heat, the labels, the hate?" JD thought for a moment. Then, "Because if someone like me doesn't, someone who knows what rock bottom feels like, then all we'll have left running this place are the people who've never had to rebuild anything." She said nothing. Because for the first time in her career, she agreed. By 9 p.m, the full interview, unedited, had aired nationwide. Not a single soundbite sliced out. Not a single headline injected. No voiceovers, no spin. Just a 28-minute exchange between two people who had started on opposite sides and met somewhere human in the middle. The internet didn't erupt. It resonated. Comments weren't a firestorm of gotcha moments or tribal trash talk. They were grateful. "I didn't expect to like JD Vance, but I respect him now." Morgan showed courage by listening. That takes more guts than arguing. This is what political media should be. That apology, it healed something I didn't know I needed healed. And then came the stories, personal, raw, and everywhere. A single mother from Cleveland who wrote, "I voted blue for 20 years. That interview made me listen for the first time, not to JD, but to my own bias." A veteran who said, "I've been angry for a long time. Watching this made me want to talk, not shout." A teacher who tweeted, "I played this for my high school civics class. They stayed silent for the whole thing. One kid cried. I did too." Even high-profile names chimed in. Bill Maher. "That JD Vance interview is proof that two smart people can disagree and still walk out better." Tulsi Gabbard. Powerful. Honest. This is the political conversation America deserves. But the moment that broke the internet, JD's closing line: "If disagreement makes me dangerous, then maybe danger just means I still care." Still care trended for 36 hours. It was painted on cardboard signs outside town halls, printed on shirts at college campuses, pinned to profiles of people who once thought they had nothing in common. Even Morgan Kessler, once a target of conservative criticism, found her inbox flooded with messages of respect from all sides. And in a late-night post, she tweeted, "I was wrong about him. But more than that, I was wrong about what this job is supposed to be. I don't want the viral moment anymore. I want the real one." That tweet hit 4 million impressions in 6 hours. JD responded with a single word: likewise. The following weekend, JD Vance stepped off a plane in Cincinnati with no staff, no cameras, no tie. Just a ball cap, an overnight bag, and the kind of face that looked both tired and fulfilled. He didn't head to the capital. He didn't check into a hotel. He drove straight to Middletown, the Ohio town that raised him, broke him and taught him how to fight without bitterness, and waiting on the porch of the small house with the crooked steps and chipped paint was his mom, Bev. A woman who had weathered addiction, poverty, and the slow rebuilding of a relationship most people wrote off as broken beyond repair. She didn't hug him right away. She just gave him that look, the kind only mothers give. Part proud, part skeptical, all heart. "You're all over the TV again," she said. JD dropped his bag and grinned. Not the worst headline this time. Bev motioned to the porch swing. "Come sit. I made that boxed coffee you hate." He laughed and followed. They sat in silence for a moment. The kind that only comes when two people have lived through enough words already. Then she spoke. "I watched that interview, the one with the reporter." JD looked down. "Yeah?" Bev nodded. "You didn't yell, you didn't preach, you just showed him who you are." JD stayed quiet, and then she added something he didn't expect. "I used to think you were trying to make up for who I was, but now I see you were trying to make space for people like me." He turned, startled. Bev was crying, soft but real. "You said dignity matters more than dependency, and I thought you meant you were ashamed of us. But I get it now. You weren't talking down, you were talking up, trying to lift people." She touched his hand. "You lifted me too, even when I didn't know it." JD's throat tightened. He didn't have a reply, because no senator, no speech, no viral tweet had ever hit him like that. Outside, a neighbor walked by and waved. "We're proud of you, JD." He waved back, eyes still on Bev. "I never wanted to be famous," he whispered. "I just didn't want kids to grow up thinking they were stuck." She squeezed his hand. "You weren't stuck. You were planted, and now you're growing something real." The email invitation had been brief, almost begrudging. "Senator Vance, you're invited to speak at Ridgewood University as part of our Dialogue Across Differences lecture series. Attendance is voluntary. Expect protest." JD Vance accepted immediately. He didn't bring staff, no security detail, just a binder of notes he didn't plan to use, and the same message he'd carried since the day he decided to run. "We've forgotten how to disagree without dehumanizing." When he stepped onto the stage at Ridgewood, a mid-sized liberal arts college known for progressive politics, the reception was tense. Students lined the back with signs, "Don't normalize fascism," "Dangerous voices, dangerous outcomes," "Silence is safer." The applause was sparse. Some faculty stood, some turned their backs. JD adjusted the mic, smiled and said, "I was told not everyone here wanted me to speak. I respect that. But I came anyway, not because I need to be heard, but because you deserve to be listened to." A few heads turned. "You've probably seen the headlines. JD Vance is dangerous. That's fair. I've said things that upset people. But can I ask you something? When's the last time you had a conversation with someone you deeply disagreed with and walked away feeling more curious than angry?" Silence. "That's what I'm here for. Not to win, but to remind us what it looks like to listen, even when we want to walk out." A student near the front stood up, tense, arms crossed. "You act like we're the problem, like we're just sensitive, but when people say the things you say, kids like me feel erased." JD paused, then nodded. "I've heard that, and I believe you." The student blinked. "I never wanted to erase anyone. I just didn't want to be erased either. We've built a culture that says if you believe in tradition, you're oppressive. If you question orthodoxy, you're dangerous. And if you grew up poor and proud of your country, you're probably a punchline. But I'm not a punchline, I'm a story, just like you." That line, it hit. Slowly, a few students lowered their protest signs. A professor nodded. One student in the third row started clapping. Then another. By the end of the talk, JD hadn't converted anyone, but he'd changed something far rarer. The tone. And as he walked off the stage, the same student who challenged him approached. "I still don't agree with most of what you said," she muttered. JD smiled. "I wasn't expecting you to." She paused. "But I'm glad you showed up," he nodded. "Me too." The Senate floor was half empty, as it often is when only a freshman senator rises to speak. But the moment JD Vance walked up to the podium, something felt different. There was no press conference announcement, no viral tweet tease, just a quiet line at the top of the agenda, remarks from the senator from Ohio. C-SPAN's viewership that day was average. For the first 10 minutes, then JD began to speak. "I was recently called dangerous, not in a whisper or a smear, but directly, on air, on camera, to my face." He looked around the chamber. "I didn't deny it, because for a long time I've wondered, what makes someone dangerous in this country now?" Is it refusing to apologize for loving the place that raised you, flaws and all? Is it quoting the Constitution without apologizing for the context? Is it saying that strength and compassion aren't enemies, but siblings? Senators who had been looking at phones began looking up. Let me tell you what I think is dangerous. Dangerous is raising kids to believe patriotism is shameful. Dangerous is believing disagreement means disqualification. Dangerous is letting fear write the next generation's future because we're too afraid of being misunderstood to speak honestly. His voice didn't rise. He didn't pound the lectern, but he didn't have to. The silence was louder than a rally cry. I've sat with people who hate me on paper and left the table as people who see me, and I've learned that listening doesn't mean surrendering your convictions. It just means you believe they matter more when tested than protected. One senator slowly closed his laptop. Another took off her glasses and looked straight ahead. JD wasn't filibustering. He was confessing. We won't save this republic by shouting louder than the other side. We'll save it by becoming the kind of country where courage sounds like respect again. That line made headlines, not because it was fiery, because it was true. The full speech aired on late-night news. Clips hit Instagram, TikTok, X from teens, veterans, moms, professors. Even Morgan Kessler posted it, writing, 3 weeks ago I called this man dangerous. Today, I call him something else, necessary. It was a grey Saturday in Middletown. No press, no podium, just a folding table in the community centre and about 80 neighbours packed shoulder to shoulder. Some in church clothes, others in ball caps and denim, all there for one reason. JD was home. Again. This wasn't a campaign stop. This wasn't political theatre. It was a town hall the way town halls used to be, raw, messy, unrehearsed. A woman in her 70s asked about gas prices. A young man in the back questioned immigration policy. A teacher asked about school funding. And JD answered them all, not with slogans, but with stories. I can't fix everything, he said at one point, but I'll show up, and I'll speak honestly, whether you clap or not. That earned a nod from a farmer near the door. Then near the end, an older man stood up. Ball cap, boots, weathered face. His voice cracked slightly. You don't remember me, do you? JD squinted, then paused. You were my bus driver, he said suddenly. The man smiled. I was. You used to sit in the back and read out loud to your little brother. The room chuckled. The man cleared his throat. I've listened to a lot of politicians in my day. A lot of talk, a lot of noise. He pointed a finger gently toward JD. But you, son? You don't sound like you're talking at people. You sound like you're talking for 'em. A silence rolled over the room like church bells at dusk. JD didn't respond. He didn't need to, because the final word, the one that mattered, wasn't his. It was the man's. You keep telling the truth, even when it don't trend. The town hall ended with hugs, handshakes, and the sound of something you can't fake. Trust. Later that night, JD sat alone on that same porch swing at his mother's house, phone buzzing with notifications, emails, headlines, but he ignored them. He scrolled to one photo someone had posted from the town hall. No filters, no lights, just him smiling, talking to the man who used to drive him to school. He hit save, then posted it with just 3 words, not dangerous, home.